So let's talk about what just went down in the driver market for 2023. Pierre Gasly has gone to Alpine, replacing Fernando Alonso, and in his place in AlphaTauri, Nyck de Vries has just joined. So for Alpine and Pierre Gasly, I think this is a pretty unsurprising move, I suppose. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo's still on the market, but I'm not sure, given the way that Ricciardo left uh, back then Renault, as it was known, and Alpine's preference for a while that it wants to have two French drivers, which I guess makes sense. It is a French team after all, and it would be good for marketing, good for branding. Gasly was probably always going to be the favored option. Uh, so this will be a pretty good move for both involved if things continue as they are. Again, Gasly, let's not forget back in 2021, you can make an argument that he was driver of the year, driver of the year, and certainly driver of the year material back in 2021 when he was racing with AlphaTauri, and he's always been, you know, the driver that's kind of pushed that AlphaTauri team forward, especially given the teammates that he's had, and he's done very well to bounce back from his disaster stint at Red Bull. I think they'll do fine. Ghazi will probably pick up a bunch of sixth places next year, or rather seventh places next year. He'll be the man to push that team forward, and Gasly and Ocon versus Norris and Piastri at McLaren for the best of rest for next year will be quite fun to watch, I think. Now we move on to Nyck de Vries. To me, this is by far and away the more interesting of the two moves that happened earlier today. Now, Nyck de Vries should, to all intents and purposes, Nyck de Vries should not have been considered for an F1 drive for 2023. I mean, you've got a lot of talent coming in from F2, which, okay, one F2 driver might still get a seat in Logan Sargent. We'll wait and see on that point. But regardless, you've got a lot of talent coming in from F2. There are a bunch of quote unquote ex F1 drivers who you could probably pick up and do a good job. You think of your Hulkenbergs and whatnot, and heck, even Ricardo's. And furthermore, he's driving for AlphaTauri, essentially Red Bull's sister team, where Helmut Marko et al. Have placed all the young drivers. And even then, even when they haven't been able to place young drivers, they usually manage to fish one out from elsewhere. The fact that they've gone to a former McLaren and current Mercedes employee to fill that role is interesting, especially when you consider that Nyck de Vries isn't exactly young. I think he's either 27 or 28, and hasn't really been, the last time he was in quote unquote the F1 paddock was in 2019 when he was in F2. I mean, yes, he's done free practices and whatnot, but a lot of drivers have done free practices. It seems like he's kind of gotten this gig off of one decent performance at Williams, which, fair play. It was a very good performance, voted driver of the day at Monza, which, had a lot of people impressed, including myself. But to give him a drive seemingly based on that, and to be talked about like being signed for numerous teams, including Alpine, seemingly, based off that, perhaps teams at all had their interest before the drive, but after the drive, they really solidified the interest. It's quite interesting, especially like I said, when you consider the amount of drivers that are on the market. Again, Nyck de Vries, he's a good driver. Make no mistake about it. He just seems like a very, very unusual signing for an F1 team to make in the current F1 driver climate, because drivers have been getting, especially rookies, have been getting a lot younger over the past years. And again, say what you want about F2 and how broken that series is and how broken those cars are, actually. But they have pumped out a consistent flow of drivers that, for the most part, have been, F1 quality. F1 quality. Have all of them been F1 World Championship winning level? No, of course not. But then again, not everyone can be. When your floor is the likes of Giovinazzi, Mazepin, and Latifi, then you've done a pretty good job as a feeder series. So again, F2 has been pumping out these drivers, and I'm quite surprised that Helmut Marko, for one, allowed Gasly to go to AlphaTauri, knowing that they didn't have a ready-made replacement. This kind of screams of the 2020 situation, or rather 2019 situation, apologies, where Daniel Ricciardo all of a sudden announced that he was going to Alpine, and Red Bull had to scramble to find another driver to place in back then Toro Rosso, now AlphaTauri. And seeing as they didn't have anyone in their academy at the time, they had to bring in an ex-Red Bull Junior, which is how we got Alex Albon into the sport. But then again, Nyck de Vries is not an ex-Red Bull Junior. I guess if they wanted to bring in an ex-Red Bull Junior, they might have called up Antonio Felix da Costa or Sebastian Buemi or something like that. But even then, that would have been a way out there. And I guess when you've got a driver who is seemingly unaffiliated, or at least it's very easy to get him out of Mercs, and who wants to drive an F1 and who's done a pretty good job on an F1 stand-in, I guess you jump at that. So I want to end this by just briefly discussing what this means for the Red Bull Academy in F2. Again, I do watch F2. I am quite a big fan of the series despite all its flaws. And I think it's clear to see that not many people, or at least not many people in Red Bull's hierarchy, think too highly about the current crop. Again, just to recap, Red Bull have got 5 juniors in this sorry, in F2 this year. You've got the likes of Liam Lawson, Jehan de Ruvela, Ayumu Iwasa, Dennis Hauger, and oh gosh, I think I'm missing one. It will it'll come to me, I'm sure. But none of them have been particularly, great. Hauger and Iwasa have been good, but not great. And they could definitely use another year in F2. Lawson, everyone expected Lawson to be championship contention material, but he's not really performed to that level arguably since Imola, or even Saudi Arabia for that matter. And the Ruvela has been already like chopping out his services elsewhere. He's done some testing for McLaren, so it's clear that there won't be a driver coming up and going straight into F1 for a little while from the Red Bull Academy. This is unless Isaac Hadjar comes into F2 next year and absolutely just demolishes everyone, a la Piastri, or a la even Tsunoda for that matter. So they're going through a bit of a reboot now, and I guess they needed a bit of a stopgap to fill that space, and hence Nyck de Vries is entering. Nyck de Vries will probably be fine. The question is now whether he'll be a one and done driver, whether someone from Red Bull will come up and really stick their claim. Because if someone from Red Bull comes up, or from the academy comes up and sticks their claim and does really well in F2 next year, you can probably bet that they will be in F1 next year. At the expense of whom, we will see.